Welcome back to today's video. Today is Friday, August 15th, 2025, and today we're going to be talking about the Senate math and the 2026 midterm elections. At the beginning of this year, we looked at the 2026 Senate races as races that ultimately might not look so good for the Democratic Party on the national level. Looking back at the last presidential election, Democrats were defending a lot of territory and a lot of states that they are now up again in 2026, where they aren't exactly expected to do phenomenally across the board. Now, Democrats do have a wave year coming. Don't get that wrong. I do think that 2026 will ultimately be a positive year for the Democratic Party, but to the degree that the Senate elections are likely to look like a massive Democratic pickup just simply wasn't grounded in reality. And I use the word wasn't and a heavy emphasis on it because I think that today Democrats have finally seen a pathway to a Senate majority emerge if everything was to go correctly in the 2026 midterms. To set the foundation for the type of elections we are looking at in this upcoming cycle, Democrats are coming off the 2024 Senate elections where they lost 2 seats across the board, and Republicans 4 seats across the board, and Republicans went from 49 to 53. And in 2026, it is the Democrats who do have to win a significant number of seats, because right now Democrats have 47 seats in the U.S. Senate, not to mention that J.D. Vance is the vice president, so not only are Democrats at a structural disadvantage, winning 3 seats isn't enough in a way it was back in the 2020 election when then Vice President Kamala Harris could break that tie in favor of the Democratic Party. Now looking at the 2026 races, Democrats were arguably in a pretty difficult position. Democrats hold 47 seats, Republicans hold 53, and at the beginning of this year, there were 2 states in particular that Democrats looked to as prime targets in the 2026 Senate elections. Maine with Senator Susan Collins and North Carolina with Senator Thom Tillis. These 2 states in particular were of unique interest to the Democratic Party because historically, Democrats have competed very heavily in North Carolina and in Maine in 2020, lost both of these races, and knew that the next time these seats would be up, that they would try their hardest to win these seats. Now looking at the dynamics at play in 2026, North Carolina, right now the incumbent Republican senator has chosen to abandon his re-election campaign after initially launching one, and then the RNC chair comes in from Washington, D.C., decides to clear the field and run in North Carolina against a popular former Democratic governor, and in the state of Maine had always been on the radar because Republicans have not won Maine since before Bill Clinton was president. And so thinking about the fact that Susan Collins has been that stickler on the Republican side that Democrats have been unable to defeat, they want to take her down in 2026. Now, obviously, this map at initial basis isn't enough for the Democrats. And that's why at the beginning of the year, we wrote off any and all chances the Democrats could even come close to flipping the Senate majority. We had been talking about long-term plans for Democrats about what the 2026 map might set up for a 2028 or even a 2030 election for Democrats in the Senate, because the math here isn't great. The math here doesn't scream that Democrats have a viable pathway forward, at least not until recently. Earlier this week, former Senator Sherrod Brown decided that he was going to do a comeback bid in the 2026 election, that he would run for Senate in the state of Ohio, a state that he lost in 2024 by about 4 points. He had been elected first in 2006, re-elected in 2012, re-elected in 2018, but 2024 was ultimately too much, and Bernie Moreno was elected to the United States Senate. But now that 2026 is shaping up to be a better year for the Democratic Party, for the first time ever, Ohio is back on the radar. For the first time ever, Ohio is looked to by the National Democratic Party that there is a candidate that they could seriously invest in and work with to win in this state. And while it is not a guarantee by any degree, it is certainly within reach in a way that it was not without Sherrod Brown. But that still puts Democrats at 50 seats. With J.D. Vance, they still break the tie. And then you have to go ahead and take a look at the surrounding states and the surrounding regions, because you don't really find that many that work too well. looking at where you are on the 50-50 map right now, you're working with Republicans and Democrats who are going to look at states like Texas and Florida as maybe, or Iowa as maybe the opportunity, but that's not where Democrats are looking to. They're jumping all the way over 1,000 miles away to the state of Alaska. Yes, you heard that correctly. Alaska right now is where Chuck Schumer is trying to court Mary Peltola, the same former congresswoman who ran in 2024, who flipped this seat for the Democrats for the first time in over half a century in 2022. Chuck Schumer has gone to her and said that you need to run for Senate. Now, there isn't perfect indication that she will run for Senate. The pathway to the governorship looks a lot more likely. But if she goes for the seat in Alaska, it actually does make the race competitive. It puts this race right now from being safe for the Republican Party to, at best, for the GOP, lean Republican. And as we widely expect, probably more make it a toss-up in this cycle. And thus, bring the Democrats to 4 target seats: Maine, North Carolina, Ohio, and Alaska. And we'll be talking a bit about some of these other states later on throughout this weekend and maybe later today, still debating whether or not we're going to touch the Texas Senate race too early before we can talk a bit about that special session that's coming to a close today. But the point is that there are targets now for Democrats. At the beginning of this year, Ohio and Alaska were well off the radar. Every indication seemed that Sherrod Brown might not even run for anything, and if he was to run for something, that he would run for governor. But then Chuck Schumer talked to him. There were some discussions and deliberations. Ultimately, Sherrod Brown made the conscious decision, I want to run for Senate. Now moving over to Alaska, very similar thing. Coming off an election loss in 2024, there were 3 options for Mary Peltola. All of the races in the same district, same statewide race: House, Senate, governorship. She filed to run for re-election in the House. Doesn't look like she's going to go that way. Governorship, been tweeting about the governor's office in Alaska. It's an open race. The front runner on the Republican side is an extreme lieutenant governor who's not going to win that race. Peltola, if she wants the governor race, it is hers. But the Senate race is often more appealing because its impact isn't just contained to the boundaries in the state of Alaska. It's quite further than that. And if there is a time for Alaska to ever vote for a Democratic senator, it would be a Democratic wave year. The last time Alaska did so was in the 2008 Senate elections, when despite, this state voting overwhelmingly, and might I say overwhelmingly way more than Trump in 2016, 20, or 24, Alaska voted by 22 points to John McCain, largely in part due to Sarah Palin coming from that state and in that district. The point is that in the 2026 races, what Democrats are hoping for is that Mary Peltola can pull off what she did in 2022. Because like I said, Alaska has voted for Democrats before, and it took a Democratic wave year. The 2008 election, this is what it was. Mark Begich here ended up winning. Now, it wasn't supposed to be this way. The predictions had said that it was going to be pretty locked in for the Republican Party, but getting to the actual election, Mark Begich came out ahead and ultimately won the Senate race. Then in 2014, Republicans won it by about 2. They flipped it, but keep in mind, Sullivan won by about 2 in 2014. Do we remember what type of year 2014 was? Well, 6 years apart from the same exact Senate races, you're finding the map looked a lot redder in 2014. This is 2008. This is 2014. But Alaska only shifted by 4. Then, 6 years later, Sullivan won by about 13 points, but less than what Trump won by in 2024. And if there was to be a year in recent memory that Democrats could win in Alaska, it would be 2026. Because even an incumbent, Don Young, who had served in this district from 1972 onward, almost lost re-election, not in 2008 and not in 2012, but instead in 2018 when he won by just 7 points. Then Peltola made this state likely for the Democratic Party. Democrats are hoping that Peltola can do it again. And while that may not be a guarantee, the realm of possibility has entered into conversation. This is a possibility for the Democratic Party. And with it being a possibility, a pathway to the United States Senate majority has emerged in a way that it did not before. And if the 2026 Senate race in Texas ends up with a strong Democrat, which there are chances that it does, and the Republicans choose to nominate someone as extreme like Ken Paxton, that race might also flip on the radar for Democrats. We see races in Iowa emerging to be slightly more competitive than we would have thought. Again, the viability in these states has only grown for the Democratic Party, as the disaffection for the president has risen in all of these states, as the national pushback against Donald Trump, and arguably on behalf of the Democratic Party by members in state legislatures, congressional delegations, attorney generals, governors, whoever it might be. Donald Trump is seeing record pushback, a record drop in approval, low numbers amongst key demographic groups that landed him a victory in the 2024 election, and now looking at 2026. States that were never even on the realm of possibility, like Alaska, like Ohio, that contained Democrats to putting all their energy and resources into just 2 states in the very beginning. Now we're starting to see it expand. Ohio on the map, Alaska on the map. Now, if Peltola passes, remove Alaska. Democrats need to find another pathway forward, but they have strong candidates in Iowa. They have strong candidates in Texas. Take a look at James Tellerico rising in the ranks in conversation in Texas. I mean, these are pretty big deals. Why? Because people look at these groups and they say, and these candidates and say, because it's 2026, they have an opening. I don't think Texas is going to flip blue, and I don't think Iowa will either. But a diversion of resources towards those states from the Republican Party makes it this much less likely that they win in states like North Carolina, Maine, Michigan, Georgia, and by extension, Ohio and Alaska. And never say never. American politics is so strange. In 2018, the last Democratic wave, the state of Texas came within 3 points in the Senate race. I know it doesn't feel like that was recent, but that was 6 years ago. That was in a day and age where Donald Trump was still president. His approval rating had been collapsing. His support and Republican Party support amongst white voters, Latinos, black voters, Asian American voters, whatever group, was at a record low. And it ushered in Democrats' double-digit victories in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, 7-point victory in Ohio, win in Montana, win in Arizona, win in Nevada, right? But Texas won by Republicans, but by just 3 points. And the warning signs in the writing is on the wall here for John Cornyn, that he is the right candidate for this race for the GOP, but ultimately, he outpaced Trump by 4 points in 2020. If it isn't John Cornyn, that race could very much pop up on the radar. The point is that the Senate map looks a lot better. With Sherrod Brown in the race and a hypothetical Mary Peltola entrance, or depending on how the Texas primary goes, a strong Democratic emergence, there are ways that simply did not exist before. And that's why Democrats look at this and say, it's not a slam dunk, but it does look a lot better. And that is the best way to describe it. Republicans, to be real, would more likely than not win Senate control this upcoming midterm cycle. But no one would even have considered that Democrats would have been able to be in that position to win Senate control. And they still might not. But any inching forward and any maintenance, and if Democrats are to win, again, those baseline states of North Carolina and Maine, and hold on to the states they have right now, in 2028, what it could likely do is that, let's say Democrats win in North Carolina and Maine, they'd likely win in North Carolina in 2028. But let's say you're working with Wisconsin. If Democrats are at 49 and they win the presidency in 2028, you in Wisconsin, you don't even need North Carolina. Now, obviously, it would be nice, but not entirely necessary. And taking a look at the Senate races in 2026, chances are these are going to end up slightly more favorable for Democrats than they think. And while I don't know if Alaska and Ohio are going to go blue, they are certainly targets for Democrats right now, and will be fascinating to watch and evolve over the next year and a half as states that Republicans and Democrats did not even have on their radar at the beginning of this second Trump administration. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the top left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch, and then a playlist for my 2026 Senate election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.